David Pastrnak responds to his benching, and Tyler Johnson is officially in the mix.
You're Locked On Bruins, your daily podcast on the Boston Bruins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Bruins fans, and welcome back to the Locked On Boston Bruins podcast. I'm your host, Ian McLaren, and this is a daily show where we discuss all things Spoke B. Today is Tuesday, November 5th, and I want to thank you so much for making Locked On Bruins part of your daily routine. Free and available on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. And before we get started, a quick reminder, you can find the podcast on social media at Locked NHL Bruins. And you can find me, my hockey thoughts, dad jokes at Ian C. McLaren. I am a lifelong Boston Bruins fan. I've been covering this team for various outlets for 20 years now. Was a full-time hockey news editor at The Score, and have been hosting this podcast since 2019. Jam-packed show today. We're going to do some Tuesday Newsday updates. Tyler Johnson signing, David Pastrnak reacting to his benching, update the Atlantic Division power rankings, and preview tonight's game against the Toronto Maple Leafs. Let's start with Boston's star player, David Pastrnak. He was benched for the third period of Boston's 2-0 win against the Seattle Kraken on Sunday. He did not take a shift after committing a pretty egregious turnover late in the second period. Thankfully, it did not lead to a goal, but Jim Montgomery clearly displeased and called it a coach's decision after the game. David Pastrnak, after practice on Monday, took full responsibility, saying, "I've just got to be better, take responsibility of being better, but at the same time, just moving forward." He said, "Today, Monday, I'm focusing on another game tomorrow," which is today, "and yesterday was yesterday. I never look back." Now, again, his final shift came in the last minute of the second with Boston on the power play, turned the puck over in the neutral zone to Yanni Gourde, who managed to put 3 shots on goal off a 2-on-1 rush. The Bruins were up 2-0 at the time. That late shorthanded goal could have been pretty devastating for the Bruins, especially when they were coming off a win over the Flyers and needed to build on that. Pastrnak does lead the team with 6 goals and 11 points in 13 games, but his production is down. He had at least 110 points in each of the previous 2 seasons. And straight up, he just needs to be better. He admitted it was a bad turnover. He takes responsibility for it. Accountability is a better word, maybe. He's moving forward, and he doesn't want to be a distraction to the team. He said the guys know how he feels about them in the room. He knows it was a bad play. He takes accountability, and he's already moving forward. Now, this comes a couple weeks after Jim Montgomery vocally, openly called out Brad Marchand on the bench. And Marchand back then said there's a lack of accountability nowadays because people can't handle the heat. You make a mistake like that, which was similar to Pasternak's, and you deserve to hear about it. So, the Bruins coming off a big weekend where they got 4 points, 2 straight shutout wins, but it ended kind of on a awkward note with that benching. Pastrnak, for his part, taking accountability, moving forward, and hopefully it pays off tonight against the Toronto Maple Leafs, as his previous call-out did back in the playoffs, where he responded to Montgomery saying he needed to be better with that overtime game-winning, series-clinching goal against the Maple Leafs. Now, that wasn't the only news in Bruins land on Monday. Finally, the news came down that Tyler Johnson was signed to a 1-year contract worth $775,000, which will be prorated here because we're well into the season. Johnson, of course, was an attendee at Boston Bruins training camp on a PTO. He has patiently waited in the wings, much like Danton Heinen did last season, waiting for his opportunity. It comes well after Riley Tufte was assigned to Providence, making room on the roster, freeing up a bit of cap space. I don't know why it took this long. I would have signed him following that 8-2 loss to Carolina last week. But here he is, and he brings a lot to the mix. Yes, he's 34 years old. He's an undersized forward, but he has that Swiss Army knife ability where he could play not only up and down the lineup, but across positions as well. He can play on the wing. He can play at center. He can line up with your top players. He can play a third line role as well. It'll be interesting to see if he gets in the lineup here tonight against Toronto and where exactly he fits in. But he brings a ton of experience to the table. He has appeared in 738 NHL regular season games with most recently the Chicago Blackhawks, as well as the Tampa Bay Lightning. He has 193 goals, 238 assists for 431 points. He also, of course, has a couple Stanley Cups as a member of the Tampa Bay Lightning and has played incredibly well in the playoffs. Looking back specifically, yes, it was a while ago, but the 2015 run by the Lightning where they lost in the final to the Chicago Blackhawks, he had 23 points, 13 goals in 26 playoff games. In total, he has 65 points, 32 goals, 33 assists in 116 playoff games. He's coming off a season where he scored 17 goals for the Chicago Blackhawks in 67 games. And like I've said numerous times on the podcast, those goals did not come playing alongside Connor Bedard. They did not come getting prime minutes for last year's Blackhawks team. He was playing on a depth role. He was playing with, borderline NHL players or borderline second, third line talent. And he still managed to get 17 goals for the Blackhawks last season, adding 14 assists for 31 points in 67 games. So just shy of a half a point per game average. The Bruins, of course, have been struggling offensively this season. So Johnson could bring some added offensive acumen to the lineup. But most importantly, look, he's a guy who does have those 2 Stanley Cups, but cap crunch. He was dealt to Chicago after his contract expired. He had to come in on a PTO. He's still a guy with some hunger left, and he's a guy who can come in and remind the guys that you could be at the highest of heights in hockey, and then a couple years later, you're scrambling for a contract, the league minimum. Nothing is guaranteed in the NHL, and hopefully Tyler Johnson could come in, not only spark the Bruins offense, but also remind these guys that every season is an opportunity here. Every game is an opportunity, and it comes and goes so quickly. You cannot let any opportunity go to waste here in today's NHL. So that's the latest here on the Boston Bruins. David Pastrnak responding maturely to the benching. He's taking accountability for his actions, for that turnover. By all accounts, he was a good teammate on the bench during that period, was not sulking or anything like that. And he knows he has to be better for this team to succeed. The team also needed to get better as a whole, talent-wise, and they did that by addressing the Tyler Johnson contract, finally signing him, and we'll see if they're able to rise here in the Atlantic Division Power Rankings, which we will update here as the podcast continues. If you're looking to hire, there's no better place to turn than Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. They don't just help you hire faster. 93% of employers agree Indeed delivers the highest quality matches compared to other job sites, according to a recent Indeed survey. Listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/lockedon. Go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on Locked On Boston Bruins. That's Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook, and they're giving you an opportunity to get in on the action with a great new deal. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you hit on that $5 bet. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL, all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Visit FanDuel.com to join today, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. The Bruins did have a much better weekend than they had been previously playing. However, they're not quite out of the woods when it comes to where they stand in relation to some of the better teams in the division and the conference. Right now, if you look at the wild card standings, the Bruins are in a second wild card spot, but it's always important to look at point percentage. And the Bruins are 5th in the Atlantic, tied with the Detroit Red Wings, and behind, well, let's take a look here. Let's go from the bottom to the top. The clear bottom team at the moment is the Montreal Canadiens. They have a record of 4-7-1, 9 points, a .375 point percentage, which means they've had 24 possible points to earn. They've only got 9. So 9 out of 24 on a math test, you get 37.5%. That's how it works. They're also well entrenched in the basement with a -17 goal differential, which is by far the worst in the division. And they've lost 3 games in a row as well. So nothing going right for Montreal right now. The clear 7th place team is the Buffalo Sabres. They also have a .375 point percentage, a record of 4-7-1 through 12 games. They've also lost 3 in a row, but they get the edge over Montreal because they have a -6 goal differential compared to -17 for the Habs. Now, this is where things get a bit more interesting for our Bruins. They are tied for 5th in point percentage with the Detroit Red Wings. Detroit is 5-5-1, 11 points in 11 games. Boston is 6-6-1, 13 points in 13 games. So the Red Wings have 2 games in hand. They're 2 points behind the Bruins. I'm giving them the edge over Boston this week because of those games in hand, as well as they have a better goal differential. Boston's at -8 still, despite shutting out the opposition twice over the weekend. And the Red Wings are at -6. So right now, the Bruins, I'm putting them still in 6th place here in the Atlantic. Yes, you can those games in hand only are good for what you do with them. So it's quite possible we'll come back next week. The Bruins keep it going. They distance themselves from the Red Wings, but right now they're both at 500, 6-6-1 for the Bruins. That's 6 wins, 7 losses. The Red Wings have 5 wins, 6 losses. The Red Wings also have 5 regulation wins compared to Boston's 4. So add that all up, and they get the edge over the Bruins right now. That's your bottom 4 right now. Montreal, Buffalo, Boston, Detroit. As we move up, we come to tonight's opponent, who we'll talk more about coming up as we preview tonight's game. But Toronto, they're not really coming in hot to this one either. They have a record of 6-5-2, 14 points in 13 games, a .538 point percentage, and they're a level 0 when it comes to goal differential. And of course, the Bruins just beat them not too long ago. So we're putting the Leafs here in at 4th this week. That puts a surprise team up in the 3rd spot right now. The Ottawa Senators have fewer points than the Bruins, but like Detroit, they have 2 games in hand. They also have a winning record, 6 wins, 5 losses. Don't forget the Bruins have 6 wins, 7 losses. And their goal differential is pretty solid at +9, which is tops in the Atlantic Division, if you can believe it. They've been getting great goaltending from Anton Forsberg lately, Linus Ullmark as well. Strong defensively. They've allowed the fewest goals in the Atlantic. So the Senators right now looking pretty good, and they've been playing without Shane Pinto as well, who's one of their key kind of secondary scoring options. So Ottawa looking like a real danger to challenge for a top 4 spot in the Atlantic and a playoff spot, which means someone from last year is going to have to come out. Hopefully it's not at the expense of our Boston Bruins. In second, you have the Lightning. They have lost 2 in a row, but they're still 7-5, a .583 point percentage, a +6 goal differential. And then the number 1 team, Red Hot, they're 8-1-1 over their past 10 games. They've won 5 in a row. That would be the defending Stanley Cup champion, Florida Panthers, 9-3-1. Despite missing Barkov for some time, he came back and has been red hot, thankfully for my fantasy team. Matthew Tkachuk's been in and out of the lineup with illness, but this team just keeps trucking along. Now, they don't have the best goal differential, as I mentioned. They're +7. Ottawa's at +9, but that's your top 4 at the moment. Florida, Tampa, Ottawa, Toronto, and of course, our Bruins take on those Maple Leafs tonight, and we will preview that game here as the podcast continues. PrizePicks is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, PrizePicks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. Run your game all season long on PrizePicks. Today is Taco Tuesday, where each Tuesday, PrizePicks discounts select player projections up to 25%. To provide even more value for your lineups. You can sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It is guaranteed. So if you think David Pastrnak will get more than 0.5 goals this week, put $5 down and you'll get that $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Download the PrizePicks app and use code LOCKEDONNHL to get that $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, that's code LOCKEDONNHL on PrizePicks. Run your game. Bruins, Maple Leafs, Tuesday night, the biggest showdown in North America. Wink. And it's going to be a doozy. Always some drama when these two teams meet. As I mentioned, the Leafs kind of struggling coming into this one. They're coming off a overtime loss to the Minnesota Wild. They've actually lost 2 in a row, including a loss to the St. Louis Blues. They're 4-4-2 over their past 10 games. And the surprising thing that you need to keep an eye on tonight is special teams. We all know Boston has had a bit of a revolving door in and out of the penalty box this season. But Toronto's power play has not really been firing. I wouldn't even say on all cylinders. They haven't really been firing at all. They rank 31st at the moment when it comes to the power play. They've only succeeded on 10% of their of their power play opportunities. Now, the Bruins do still lead the NHL in minor penalties. They've taken 66 minors through 13 games, 10 more than the Maple Leafs, who have taken 56. We all know, of course, the Leafs do have a ton of offensive talent, and you don't want to be the team against whom they break out on the power play. They have a loaded lineup with Mitch Marner, William Nylander, Austin Matthews, John Tavares, Matthew Knies, Max Domi, who we all know can put the puck in the net. He's got 0 goals this season. Max Pacioretty has had success on the power play before. Morgan Riley, quarterbacking. Oliver Ekman-Larsson with some power play acumen as well. The only players to have power play goals this season for this team, Nylander, Matthews, Tavares. So at some point, they're going to figure it out. We don't want it to be tonight against the Boston Bruins. Boston's penalty kill traditionally has been strong. It's not that great this season. 78.6% success rate, good for 17th. And their power play is not clicking that well either. They're at 14.8%, ranking 25th. The Leafs do have a top 10 penalty kill. They rank 9th with an 84.3% success rate. The Leafs are a very strong face-off team. They rank 3rd, 55.7 success rate. The Bruins, this was an area of targeted improvement, bringing in Lindholm. Tyler Johnson has some experience in the dot. They rank 11th, which isn't too bad. Boston's offense, which needed that boost from Johnson, ranks 26th in the NHL. They're scoring 2.62 goals per game, whereas the Leafs rank 16th at an even 3 goals per game. So both offenses struggling. Toronto, hampered by the lack of power play success. Again, you don't want to be the team against whom they break out. Goals allowed, the Bruins rank 22nd, 3.23, and that's after 2 consecutive shutouts. The Leafs rank 8th, allowing 3 goals per game. And again, they're coming in on 2 straight losses. They've lost 5 of their past 7, including the overtime loss to the Bruins just a couple weeks ago. Now, Mitch Marner leads this team in points over their past 5 games with 7 points, 6 assists. William Nylander with 4 goals for this team over their past 5 games. For the Bruins, Marchand is their leading point scorer over their past 5 with 6, including 3 goals, 3 assists. David Pastrnak leads the way in helpers with 4. And of course, he was benched, and we're expecting a huge response for him tonight. Hopefully one of his better games of the season. Pastrnak right now is well off his pace from the past couple of seasons. He's, as I mentioned, 11 points through 13 games so far this season, on pace for only 69 points, 38 goals, 32 assists, which would be a devastating drop-off from last season. He really needs to get things going. He hasn't scored in his past 4 games since the last Toronto game. So Pasta being paid as one of the elite players in the NHL, not producing as such right now, and he really needs to step up, as do some of those secondary scorers that we've been talking about recently. Anthony Stolarz has played very well for the Leafs in net. He's got a .919 save percentage. Joseph Woll, .892 for the Bruins. Swayman at .895. Korpisalo at .894. I would expect Swayman to be in the net tonight as Boston's big-time, high-paid goalie. These are the games that you need to get up for. The Bruins, of course, led in scoring by Pastrnak and Marchand, 11 and 10 points, respectively. Kastelic, Beecher, Kepke, they're sliding a bit, but still in the top 5 in Bruins scoring. We need more from Frederick, Coyle, Zacha, Patra, all of whom have 4 or fewer points here this season. They've taken good steps. They had good games over the weekend, but we need to see more from those guys here beginning tonight, to be sure. So, a jam-packed episode of Locked On Boston Bruins here today. So much to talk about as we discuss the fallout from the Pastrnak benching and his reaction to it. Tyler Johnson finally added to the mix. We'll see who comes out of the lineup, if anybody. He has been practicing with the team, so it's not as if he needs practices to get acclimated. Perhaps Morgan Geekie comes out. They're not taking out Justin Brazeau. So my guess, if anything, would be Geekie coming out of the lineup with Johnson going with Frederic and Poitras on the third line. Again, Brazeau has been playing well lately with Zacha and Coyle, so I don't see that trio coming out. The top line's not changing. The fourth line isn't changing, so that's the only place I see that happening if it indeed does. Tomorrow, we will, of course, recap tonight's action, all the storylines, stats, and signals you need to know from tonight's game between the Bruins and Maple Leafs. We'll bring you all the latest on the black and gold. Thank you again for making Locked On Bruins part of your daily routine. Don't forget to check out the Locked On NHL Fantasy Podcast. They'll give you all the insight you need to get an edge over your competition this week. Steal and flip. Such knowledgeable guys. Please do subscribe on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. It's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. I know it's a tough day out there, a lot of uncertainty, but thankfully we can spend some time talking about our favorite hockey team, watching them tonight. Please do take care of yourselves today, friends. Take care of each other. And we'll talk to you again here tomorrow on Locked On Boston Bruins.